believe it or not, this is so important and it's going to be hopefully so empowering for you. Stress has become the bad guy. And in order to refine our language to a point where it can actually be useful to us and bring us positive outcomes, we really need to look at how we use this word stress. In a moment, I'm about to show you some graphics. If you're like me and you do lots of your learning, your reading, your research in the car by listening to it, then just put some time aside later on in the day just to quickly have a look at the graphics because there's only a couple, but it really will help you get an understanding and just a visual picture of what we're talking about here. And as always, I'll explain it in detail for you now. Uh, so before we start, it's really important to understand that most of us believe that in order to be healthier or happier, we need to eliminate stress from our lives. I'm about to go through why that's not actually feasible. If it's not feasible, we don't want to be focused on it. Okay, if we want the healthy and those positive outcomes, we want to be focusing on something that is feasible. Okay, that's just common sense, isn't it? And it makes sense when we put it in that context. It's the same with stress. We can't eliminate stress from our lives, so we don't want to be focused on doing that. What we can do is recontextualize what stress actually is and give ourselves a bit of a roadmap to achieve utilizing stress in a really successful way on a moment-to-moment basis. And this again is when meditation comes into play. It becomes just the center, just the quarterback of everything that's happening. And meditation is, again, that is going to become that thing in your day that really helps you utilize stress. But I'm using that word, okay? And you're probably creating a different image in your head when I use that word stress. So let's get on the same page and start creating the same picture for ourselves so we can get to that next lesson and start improving our focus and start exercising it. So as a really quick definition of stress, let's start thinking of stress as the byproduct of doing. And we can think of the tires on your car here, because in order to drive, those tires are enduring an incredible amount of stress, right? Not even on a hot day, just on a a general day, just down the road to the shops, they're still enduring an incredible amount of stress. Even your car just sitting in your driveway, those tires are still carrying the weight of the car, even as the car is resting. Even by just doing that resting, even just by sitting there, which is just a minimal form of doing for a car, these tires are still experiencing a particular amount of stress. Another analogy that we can use here are trees outside. Now, we want trees to grow outside, but we might see that they're bending and they're swaying in the wind, and that is putting those branches under a certain amount of stress. It's putting that tree under a certain amount of stress. Now, we don't run out and say, I've got to stop the wind from swaying those branches. We say, oh, that tree is able to sway and bend to the wind. It's learned how to do that. It's learned how to be under that stress. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a negative thing. Just like we say, I don't want to take my car out today because the rubber on my tires is going to be enduring an awful amount of stress. We don't say that. We know that the tires have been manufactured to drive, to endure that stress. So we take it out. Now, if we don't look after the tree, if we don't look after the tires, then over time, it starts to be able to handle less and less stress. So we can have a look at why that is now. And this is a graphic that I hope you're going to find very, very empowering. I work with a lot of different people, and no matter what industry they're in, no matter what their mindset is or perspective is, they're all able to come together around this simple little graphic. And this is from the Chelsea Clinic in Philadelphia, and it's just one of the best ways I've seen this curve portrayed. It's been around for years and years and years. So if we look at the y-axis, that horizontal axis, that vertical axis, that is performance. So we can see that as we move up, the performance changes. We've also got an x-axis, that horizontal axis down the bottom, and that is our stress level. So just like we used in those analogies, if the performance or if the stress level changes, then the performance changes with that as well. So if I don't look after my tires, if I don't maintain them in the way that I should, which I know I'm not great at, I know a lot of us are, then the tires don't last as long because the performance isn't able to handle as much stress over time. So the performance and the stress level are intricately related. Let's have a look at what's going on in this graph now. So there's a curve that's traveling from the bottom, arches up and then comes back down. And it sort of creates this wave form. And on the right-hand side, this is where we're focused as a culture. All right, this is all stress. Everything you're seeing in this graphic is a stress. We only think of stress as the right-hand side of this curve. So we think of stress as being exhaustion, anxiety, panic, anger, breakdown. We see it as being just too much, overloaded, overwhelmed, burnt out. When we say, I'm stressed, or man, that was a stressful day, or I'm really stressed out, I really don't want to be able to do this, we are only talking about the right-hand side of that curve. Now, again, keep coming back to the analogy, the tree. We don't want to get rid of the wind. We don't say that tree is too stressed. We want to eliminate the wind from its life. We want to be able to treat ourselves the same way. We want to use the same language with us. So again, we can start really becoming empowered over how we look after ourselves and what we do to look after ourselves. So I'm going to ask you now to stop using the word stressed. It's too general. It doesn't mean anything. It can mean all sorts of different things, and it can mean nothing at the same time, especially if we're using it out of context. So let's have a look at what the word for what we think of stress in our culture is. It starts with a D. Try and say it as I say it. Distress. That's right. That is over on the right-hand side of the curve. Now we can already start getting a lot more specific. That tree is in distress. Okay, straight away I go to, man, maybe it hasn't been fertilized properly. Maybe it's got a bug. Maybe we need to go look at it and assess what's wrong with it and look at the plants growing around it because it's in distress. It's gone over onto the right-hand side of that curve, just like the tires on our car. It's in distress. Okay, well, I know straight away that we need to do some maintenance on it, that we need to look after it. So for us, after a big day, we can still be feeling okay, but we can still say, man, that was a stressful day. But our mind goes to thinking that's a negative thing. But I can have a really stressful day and it can be a great day. But if I say, I'm really distressed at the moment, or that was really distressing, instead of I'm really stressed, or that was really stressful, then we're already getting a lot more specific about where we're at and what we need to do next. So distress is one of the words we're using instead of stress. We're actually going to break stress down into two different words. One of those words is distress. Let's have a think about the other word that we might be using. So distress is the fight or flight, the survival mode of stress. It's the reactionary side of stress. So when I'm in distress, I'm reacting. My body thinks that I'm fighting for something. My body believes that it needs to use the cortisol, the adrenaline, to fight off and react to the things around me. That's why we get angry and grumpy and frustrated and opinionated. What about the other side of stress? We've had a great day. You know, we've just banged out all of these jobs. We have talked to so many people. We've been happy. We've been really connected. I've done a lot of different things. We've done all sorts of different jobs. There's a lot of stress involved in that, but it's been a great day. What word do I use? Many people don't know. I've actually only worked with 3 people that were able to tell me this word. It starts with an E and a U, and it's pronounced you. It's eustress. Now, most of us have heard of that word distress because we're focused on the negative. We're focused on survival mode. We're focused on the reactions. Very few of us have heard of this word eustress because where our focus flows, our success grows. And if we're focused on survival mode and reactionary states, we become really successful at being in those states to the point that we forget the language that's involved in the other states, in the more efficient states, in the happier states, in the healthier states, in the responsive states. So we've been focused on these reactionary states. We've been focused on distress. Most of us have forgotten that there's an entire world, an entire other end of the curve that we can choose to access. And that is eustress. So I can come home at the end of the day and I can say to my beautiful wife, yeah, that was a really distressing day. She knows exactly where I'm at. And she can ask questions to determine, to get even more specific, like, where are you at? Like, what type of distress are you at? Or I can come home and say, well, that day was just, that was a great day, man. I was so eustressed after that day. Again, it puts us into a position where we can then figure out what our next steps need to be. So when eustress, we are activating the parasympathetic nervous system. We are responsive. We are feeling all those emotions that come along with that. And underneath this curve sits all those emotions. It sits all those different states. So we can see that in that burnout mode of distress. So that's when things are starting to get really, really serious. We're often irritable, so we're cranky most of the time. We have sleeping problems, we're rarely decisive, as opposed to being in a state of eustress where, I'm in that optimum state and I'm rarely irritable. I'm sleeping really well. I'm decisive nearly all of the time. That is where we want to be. When we say, I want to get rid of stress from my life, what we actually mean is, I want to be in a state of eustress. I want to be making decisions quickly. I want to be interested in the things that are going on around me. To get to that point, we don't want to get rid of stress. It's the opposite. We want to utilize stress. So stress is the thing that gets us to that state. So we are no longer using the word stress. It's become too stigmatized. It's become just packed with misunderstanding, and we're fearful of it. We're reactive to it. And we're not focusing on those reactions anymore. We're going to start focusing on the responses, on the eustress. And that starts with changing our language. So when you catch yourself saying, yeah, no, that was a stressful day, or yeah, I'm really stressed, whether that's external or internal, whether you're just saying it to yourself in your mind, figure out what word you need to use. Is it eustress or distress? Most of the time at the start, it'll be distress because we're just practiced in focusing on that. We're practiced in thinking about stress in that way. But you'll start to notice times of eustress as you keep practicing this. And all you're doing at the moment after this lesson is clicking out the word stress and clicking in distress and eustress. And even that starts to have a profound effect on the perspectives that you have. And we're not even meditating yet. All we're doing is cultivating knowledge and understanding so that when we sit down to meditate, we are ready. We know what we're doing and we know why we're sitting here. So a quick overview of stress. We have distress. We have eustress. Distress is what we think stress only is. Distress is reactive. Distress is states of exhaustion and anxiety and panic and anger. Distress leads to sleeping problems. Distress leads to diseases. Distress leads to being grumpy and being snappy, even with the people that you love. And there are different states of distress. The first red flag that you're entering a state of distress is that growing sense of fatigue. You are just feeling fatigued all of the time. That permeates everything that you do. And then that leads to exhaustion. That leads to anxiety, panic, and anger. And this is where our culture is used to living. In fact, we have normalized living in this state. 70% of us in the Western culture exist and live in a normalized state of distress. That's why most of us haven't heard the word eustress, because we've normalized distress to the point now it's just become what stress means to us. We've forgotten that there's a whole other world out there. And it's because we've normalized it. We've normalized it because we've consistently focused on it. Let's change that up. Let's change the game right now and start focusing on the other side of the curve. Eustress. And eustress is everything we want. Eustress is, we'll still feel tired, but only because the stress that's being used to do the doing, which is the byproduct of doing, needs to be recuperated, needs to be rejuvenated. Tired is very different to feeling fatigued. Fatigue permeates everything. Feeling tired is just the way that the body re-energizes, rejuvenates, and recoups that energy back. So I'll exercise and I'll feel tired, and then I'll feel good after doing that exercise. This is a really simple example of the difference between feeling tired and fatigued. And in a state of eustress, I'm going to be feeling very different to that normalized state of distress. I'm going to be interested in the things around me. I'm not going to be snappy with the people I love. In fact, I'm going to be connected to them. I'm going to be responsive to them, because in a state of eustress, I am in a state that's commonly known as rest or digest. So I am in this state where I'm able to be responsive. I'm not fighting, I'm not reacting. That's for distress. Eustress is for connecting. It's for being efficient. It's for going into those modes where I don't even have to think about what I'm doing. I'm just in a flow state. And again, there's all different parts and stages to eustress as well. Now, before I sign off on this lesson, I want to make it very clear that distress is not necessarily a negative thing. It exists for a reason. We need to go into states of distress at different points in our lives. The problem has occurred, though, like I said, that we've normalized it. 70% of us have normalized it. And that means that we exist in distress for the majority of our lives. This is extremely problematic, because that means that the body is always in this state of reactionary states. It's always in that fight or flight state. And we can also be in freeze or nest states as well. And we start really seeing this behavior all around us, people getting fired up over small things, people being really reactionary to things that, in the bigger picture don't actually matter. It's because they're in a state of distress. It's not because they're stressed. Okay, all of us are stressed because we're living and we're constantly doing, whether it's the beating of our heart or the breathing. So we're all stressed, but most of us are distressed. Very few of us are in a state of eustress. And we know those people that are in states of eustress when we meet them. They're the people that we say, I want what they've got. I want to be that. They're not stressed. Okay, they're just so cruisy and calm. They are stressed. We're all stressed, but they are in a state of eustress as opposed to being in a state of distress. So our first real challenge here in this essentials course is to stop using the word stress and to start using the words distress and eustress instead. I would also recommend using this picture as well. Keep coming back to it. Keep coming back to this graphic, whether it's this one or another stress curve, just to keep reminding you that stress is not the bad guy, that we can actually utilize stress if we have the appropriate fuel and skills to do so. But if I'm constantly in a state of breakdown, and then I feel better as I get back up into a point of anxiety, I feel better than I did in breakdown, so I probably think that I'm better, but I'm still in a state of distress. If we've forgotten that eustress exists, then that's the path we're going to take. We're just going to keep going up and down that side of the hill on distress. Now we know that eustress exists, so let's aim to get back over the hump and exist in a state of eustress. Let's do it, and let's do this together, because it's the best way to do it. As always, I'll see you in the next lesson, and I hope that that really resonated with you, because I know that when I first found out about distress and eustress, it was the first step to me being able to exist in eustress and live in eustress and notice when I'm in distress and being able to respond to that instead of react to it.